All right, seventh graders, it's time to do some labs. And we're going to start off with one that I like to do every year at the beginning of the year when we're getting ready to get into cells. It's called the Eggsperiment. Yeah, it's a play on words. And yes, we're going to use an egg in the lab. There's a couple of reasons we use the egg. I'm not going to give them away, uh, but you'll find out as you go along in through the lab. It's going to take us about 4 days to do this lab. And maybe you've heard about it from your older brother or sister who was in my class or one of the other science classes here. That's all right. Um, I think it's still a fun lab to experience. And the other thing is, you could do this at home while we're doing this in class. You don't need a lot of complicated uh, material here. An egg, right? Some vinegar, some syrup or corn syrup, and water. And really, that's it. Now, we're going to do some measurements, but you don't have to do the measurements because we're going to be doing them as a class together. So if you just want to do your own egg at home, make sure you check with your parents, make sure you have all the materials. But if you want to, it's pretty easy to do. Right? So every good lab has objectives. Those are the reasons why we're doing the lab. Why are we actually performing this lab? What are we going to see out of it? And the first one says to review and apply the skills needed to successfully set up and conduct a scientific investigation. I'm going to be modeling that for you, so you're not going to have to do much on that one. And then the next one says introduce the concepts of osmosis and diffusion and the function of the cell membrane. And you may not know about any of that stuff. That's all right. It's in the background there. The first paragraph talks about the cell membrane. The second paragraph talks about diffusion and osmosis. And even after you read those, you still might be confused. That's okay too. I'm not going to get into that today. I don't want to bombard you with too much stuff today, but we'll talk about that probably on day two so that you kind of have an idea about why those are being mentioned. And we have our procedure, day one, day two, day three, day four. We're only going to be doing day one, obviously, today because it is day one. We'll record the mass of the egg and we'll record the circumference in centimeters. We'll place the egg in some vinegar. So I'll go through all that procedure in a little bit. Here's your data table you're going to be working with every day of the lab. And as we do measurements on the egg, you're going to be entering those numbers. So beginning mass today, beginning circumference today, and then after the day, after one day's up, tomorrow we'll do mass after 24 hours, circumference after 24 hours, and so on. We'll fill this up. That's going to be part of your grade. The other part of your grade is going to be you giving me a hypothesis on day one, day two, and day three. Also, day two, you're going to give me a description. Day three, you're also going to be giving me a couple of descriptions and a hypothesis. So today, you're only going to have to write the conclusion to that first part of that hypothesis. It says, if I place a raw egg in vinegar for 24 hours, then. So the if and the then are underlined. It's an if and then statement. That's a very kind of basic way to do a hypothesis, but it is a cause and effect, and it's effective for our purposes to write it out that way. You're not going to have to write anything other than what you think is going to happen. So that's what you're going to type in the text box here. What do you think is going to happen if we place the raw egg in vinegar for 24 hours, right? All right, so here's the materials for the egg experiment, right? Got a few things here. Of course, we're going to use the egg. Right, gonna have a raw egg, one right out of the carton from the store. Just got it at HEB. Got a little piece of string or twine or yarn, however you want to, whatever you want to use there. A ruler that has a metric side. We've got to use centimeters, so we're gonna have the metric side, not the inches. We're going to use a digital scale, and there's the on-off button there, and I'm turning it on. I'm going to use a petri dish or half the petri dish so that the egg doesn't roll off the scale. You can see how the egg wants to roll right there. So I'm placing that on there. Of course, that adds mass. It adds exactly a gram of mass. You can see that one there. I'm going to press the tare button. That's T-A-R-E, and that zeroes the scale. Now we'll put the egg back on there, and you can see how it wants to roll backwards again. But it's at 59 grams. 59 grams is going to be what we use to record. All right, so our beginning mass is going to be 59 grams, and we're going to type it in right there. Put a gram there because it is grams, and then let's see if I can make that a little bigger. So you guys can see it. All right. So now we're going to take the circumference of the egg. I'm going to wrap that piece of yarn around the center of the egg, as close to the center as I can get. It's a decent estimate of the circumference of the fattest part of the egg. So we're going to put it down along the ruler, stretch it out, and it's right at 14 centimeters. That's a pretty good estimate of what we got. And our beginning circumference is 14 centimeters. So 14, and then we'll put a little cm for centimeters. Let's make that a little bigger. All right, so before we do the last step for day one, let's write our hypothesis. And like I said before, it's an if and then statement. If I place a raw egg in vinegar for 24 hours, then, so you need to type in what you think is going to happen in your slide here, right? So is it going to get bigger? Is it going to get smaller? Is it going to change color? Is it going to explode? Or, tell me what you think is going to happen. Try not to be ridiculous about it. Try to be scientific about it, but give me your best guess, guys, because that's what our hypothesis is. Okay, so now is the last step, right? And so we're going to take the egg, we're going to put it in a glass cup. If I was in school while I was filming this, I would have probably used a beaker, but you want to be able to see through it. That's probably the best thing, so a glass cup would be good. Going to use distilled white vinegar. It's what you could buy at HEB, 5% acidity, the same kind of vinegar that's used in ketchup and mustard and salad dressing, those kinds of things. People use it to clean a lot of times. I'm just going to cover the egg just enough. It's a little bit buoyant, starts to float up just a tad, right? And it doesn't take very long. In fact, it's only been about a minute. You can see all the bubbles that are forming around the egg. You can see the egg just move slightly right there. So the vinegar is having an effect on that egg. I'm not sure what you hypothesized, but it's definitely having an effect already.